Hi again, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Next Chapter, a podcast featuring alumni from the College of Fine Arts and Communication here at Western Illinois University. My name is Buzz Hoon. I'm the interim dean for the college. I'm also the host of this podcast. In each episode, we feature an alumnus from one of our programs in the college. Today, I'm talking with Patti Nemec, who graduated from WIU in 1977 with a Bachelor of Science degree, and then a year later, 1978, with a master's degree. So welcome to the podcast, Patti.
Thanks for having me.
So just a disclaimer here, you were actually WIU was situated with different colleges situated, and speech pathology, I think, was in a different area. But we are so glad to feature you because, you have some interesting stories to tell us about not only what WIU was like in the 1970s, about speech pathology and the program that we're so very proud of and glad to have within our college, because the students and the graduates are just doing some outstanding things. And so I always like to begin with, tell us where you are, what's going on in life, and then we'll dig a little bit about your background.
Well, actually, I'm still in Macomb. I met my husband here, and when we finished our degrees, we decided to look for jobs in this area because we'd gotten very familiar with it and comfortable here. So we both did pursue our careers here, and we finished our careers here. And so now we are retired here and enjoying our friends and the easy life we have.
And that's such an awesome, a lot of times people that come to Macomb, they always think, well, I'm only going to be here for a few years. And it's funny, like myself, I've been here for, over 30 years as well. How it becomes home. It's an easy place to live, and it's really comfortable. And we've always felt like we've made the best friends you could make here. The people here are so nice, and everybody's really helpful, and it's just an easy lifestyle. And now that we're retired, we winter somewhere else, but this is still our home, and we're happy to be here. Well, we're so glad that you were able to join us on the podcast for this. So we're glad you're back in Macomb and willing to do this. But let's go all the way back. I like to talk about what it was like growing up, and you're from Highland Park, is that right? That's
from Highland Park, Illinois. It's a suburb north of Chicago on Lake Michigan. It was a wonderful place to grow up, and a lot of my family is still there. I graduated from Highland Park High School and started college right after that, and I never went back there, but I've always stayed really connected to there.
Yeah.
So I still, to this day, I like to go back and visit relatives and friends.
What kind of things was a young Patti involved with and like to do? What kind of influences early on in your life, whether it was, just the neighborhood or family or friends or those kind of things? What were some big influences on you?
Well, the beach was close by. We were just about a block and a half from Lake Michigan. So I spent a lot of time down at the beach with friends. I also love to be outdoors, and it's very wooded there. So I spent a lot of time in the woods, walking out in nature, and I still enjoy that today.
Wow, that would be amazing to have that huge lake within walking distance.
It's a big part of living there because it's a privilege, really, to be that close to Lake Michigan and to have that lifestyle available. And then being near Chicago, we were 30 minutes by train or car, really, from Chicago. So a lot of times we just hop on the commuter train and go down to the city for the day or drive down. And so the city offered a lot of opportunities for us too. And I still love Chicago. It's a great city and a fun place to be. My parents were just pretty much your average parents of the 60s. We had a really wholesome upbringing and a lot of family values, a lot of discussions at the dinner table. And my grandparents on both sides immigrated from Italy when they were adults. So I have a very large extended Italian family, which now has dwindled some, but growing up, we were with the family a lot. And so that was really fun too.
Yeah. So was there an expectation when you're in high school that you were going to college, or was this sort of a, how were your how were your parents, supporting you and encouraging you?
I was going to college. There was no question. I wasn't even sure at times I wanted to go to college, but it wasn't a question. I was going to go. And whether or not I finished would have been a bump in the road when we got there, but we never got there.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was just expected that I would go.
It was expected. What kind of things did you do in high school that you enjoyed doing during that time?
Well, I spent a lot of time with friends. I remember that. We just had a lot of different social events going on. I remember high school being very social. But it was a good time. I don't remember it as something that I dreaded. Like some of my friends and classmates, they don't like to think back to high school, but I was having a pretty good time. So I didn't have too many complaints.
So you decided to go to a rival school, Eastern Illinois University, to start your academic career. And were you interested in the field already, or were you just kind of exploring?
Yes, no, I was definitely interested, not in speech pathology, but in hearing impaired. My mother had a brother that had muscular dystrophy in the 20s and 30s, before they really even knew what it was. And we just had a real compassion growing up for people with special needs and people that were different. And so I always had a real draw towards special needs population. And I had a first cousin that I was close to, and she was just a few years older than me, and she got a degree in hearing impaired. So she became, we call them then teacher of the deaf. So she became a teacher of the deaf, and I just really loved her, and she really stimulated my interest, and probably between those two things, the spark just got better. As I got older, the spark got bigger. And so when I went to Eastern, I was really planning to be a teacher of the deaf, which is now hearing impaired. And they didn't have very many programs in the state. So I was encouraged to get a bachelor's degree in speech pathology and audiology, and then a master's degree in hearing impaired education. And that was kind of my path. But when I was at Eastern, I was really just taking basic curriculum classes. And so I didn't even really get my feet wet there. And then I transferred to Western a couple of years later. And when I got here, they allowed me to take some classes in speech path right away. And I remember one class in particular that the professor's name was I think her name was Barbara, but she was Dr. Zimmerman. And the class was speech science. And I just loved it. I just fell in love right then. And so that was probably when I changed my mind. I just felt a real connection to speech pathology. And from that time on, it was a straight path.
Well, that's a great story. And I hope that our faculty understand that, when they're out teaching, and sometimes it can be hard when you just trying to get through the semester, about the potential impact you can have on the young persons, like the Professor Zimmerman had on you, to really help you find what you may be doing for the rest of your life. And as it turned out, sort of directed you in that area.
That was very exciting. And being a small major, which I don't know if that's really considered a small major, but I would guess we probably had only maybe a dozen professors at the time, or maybe even a few less. And so they have a huge impact on your life because they're teaching all your classes. They're teaching all your core classes. You're together at the clinic, which is also, I think, unique for my department, is that we have a clinic where we actually practice doing speech pathology with various clients. And so that brings you into a smaller connection. And we spent social time together, and we had a lounge. I can't exactly remember what it was called. It might have been called a study lounge, but there was a lounge for the students. And so when we weren't doing therapy in our clinic or practice clinic or in class, a lot of times we would just go to the lounge and we socialized there. We studied together. We talked about things. We discussed our major. It was really exciting to have that. So we were pretty absorbed in the department.
Now, for those that don't know this story, and you and I have this special connection because a few years ago, right when I had started in the dean's office, you came with some of your with some of the people from your era and
Yes.
toured Brown Hall, which is where everything was located at that time.
Yes.
And I remember, I think you guys talked about how potentially the student lounge was in our offices here within the dean's office now.
Mhm.
So that was, and what a great group of people to come back and have such fond memories. And that made me very happy to know, a group of people like that had remained in contact.
Oh, it was unbelievable to be together again. We hadn't seen it. Most of us hadn't seen each other for a little over 40 years.
Wow.
Even though we may have been in touch, or if one saw another, then we might have gotten news of what somebody was doing. And we tried to stay in touch occasionally, but that's the first time we were physically together for over 40 years. And it was so much fun. My house was the hospitality house for the weekend. And I didn't know how it would be. I was hoping it would be fun, but it just felt like no time had passed at all. And it was great. But that little clinic was shaped like a horseshoe.
Mm-hmm.
And the therapy rooms were down each of the halls. And so were the offices of our faculty. And then at the end of the hall, like you said, was the student lounge. And really, that was our hangout place.
And what I've always appreciated about the clinic opportunity is that it really gives students an idea of what they're going to be experiencing, in terms of real human contact.
It was so important to do that. It really was, because it gave us a feel for what we were going to be doing before we were doing it. And we were doing some good, because we had supervisors that were helping us through everything and teaching us things. And of course, we had to plan for our therapy sessions, so we had to know what we were doing. We were also highly encouraged to always look and dress professionally.
Oh, good.
And I really took that with me, because I'm not sure that's always encouraged directly,
Mm-hmm.
but it was for us. It was something that was expected, and it was valued. And I liked that too. And of course, now, since you mentioned we had the reunion, we were so happy to be able to go into the new clinic, because none of us had been there. And it is a phenomenal facility. So if anybody's thinking of a degree in speech pathology, they should definitely think about Western.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because we are definitely proud of the hard work and the dedication that our students and faculty both put into that clinic. And I try to tell people, we not only connect with all ages of the community, young people, older people, of course, but we go out into the community as well. So they come here, we go out there as well. So just an awesome connection with the community.
That facility is just beautiful. And it has lots of opportunity. You could just see it when you walk into the library, or you walk into the room that had the therapy materials, or the waiting room. Every aspect of it was impressive.
So WIU in the 70s, we're talking about some of the highlights of the university in terms of enrollment numbers, the town. What kind of things did you like to do? Just even socially around Macomb?
Well, that was the heyday of Western, I think. That was just booming.
Mm-hmm.
And we were on quarters at the time. So if you stayed for summer, you got a full quarter toward your degree. So the university was really busy year round. There were lots and lots of students on campus for summer quarter. What they did is, when we were on quarters, I think our classes were 45 minutes during a standard quarter, but during summer, the quarter was a few weeks shorter. So our classes were an hour. So we were able to get the same amount of time, the same amount of education, the same amount of knowledge in a few weeks shorter time. I think it was only 8 weeks in the summer. So there was a lot of activity on campus. It was really hopping, believe it or not. It was a very busy place. The town had a lot more stores on the square. We had a lot of people went to Lake Argyle for lots of things. I don't know if they do anymore or not, but we spent a lot of time out at Argyle, and we just had a lot of fun in college. It was hard work and fun. If you could balance the two, it was a great experience.
As you mentioned, you were on that quarter system. And then when, for those that don't know, as an undergraduate, there's a need that in your area, you have to get your master's degree. And so you decide to, go ahead and come and stay here at WIU, get that master's degree, and really, I think an accelerated schedule. I mean, it must have really bonded everybody.
Oh, it really did. We were, as I've mentioned, a small department. So we knew pretty much everybody in our department. And, but you still were on a graduating track. You were on a track with a certain number of students because we all had to take certain classes pretty much in a certain order when they were offered. So depending on when you started, that's kind of the group that you followed. And so we had this small group of, I'm guessing it was about 13 or 14 students that did most of our coursework together. And we ended up graduating with our bachelor's degrees at the same time, which was spring of, I think you said 77.
Right.
Is that what you said?
Yep.
And so if we started our master's degrees immediately, the summer of 77, we were able to finish them in August of 78, which was the last time that would be possible. So we all started our master's degrees right after graduating with our bachelor's degrees, and we all finished our degrees in that 1 year. And pretty much that's the group that came back for the reunion. There were others in that group that didn't come back, but I believe everybody that came back that weekend graduated with their master's at that same time. I think that's correct. And then after that, of course, it went to 3 semesters immediately.
Right.
And then after that, I'm not sure what it is now. I don't know how long it takes to get your master's in speech path.
Well, I think there's an expectation it's going to take a couple of years. And so, for somebody to, when you look back, do you think, well, I was young and I was naive and I had the energy and them to do such an activity, because that must have been, it's still something that was probably mentally and physically a little bit challenging.
It was, but our classes were really small. And again, we knew our professors really well. And I just feel like we all loved that major. Mm-hmm. And so it was, a lot of people going through college would say, oh, don't take that professor, they're really hard. Not necessarily in our department, but even in other departments that we had to take classes in. And that was the professor I usually took. And I felt like that's what we wanted. You didn't want a professor that wasn't good, but I didn't want one that was easy either. Right. Because I really believe that what you absorb in college really prepares you for your career. And the master's program was really exciting. So yeah, it was hard, but it was exciting. And we had a nice support system in our faculty and other students. So there were times when I was stressed out. I'm not saying that. There were lots of times I was stressed out, but
that's college life.
But I felt like I got done really prepared.
That's such a good story. And when you got done, I'm sure, I mean, when I read your story, and I'm just wondering, you're from the Chicago suburbs. Was there any sort of inclination at all in your mind to say, well, that's where I'm going back, but you took a different path?
I did. I didn't ever plan to go back there.
Okay.
I might have gone out west. I had good friends in undergrad school that weren't speech path majors, and then, of course, in graduate school that were speech path majors that ended up in California and Colorado. By the time I finished my master's degree, my closest friends were in Colorado. So I took my first job here because I had taken my job before they took their jobs. And I took my job here thinking I might relocate out there. So after my first year of work, I went out there and pursued the possibilities, and then came back here for various reasons. But it was interesting because Macomb, well, Eastern's in Charleston, Illinois, that was a big culture shock. And then coming to Macomb, you're in another rural Illinois town. It was similar to Charleston, but still really a shock. And you had mentioned earlier how many people you know, and that even maybe you thought you would be here for a short time.
Right.
And I was sure I was going to be here for a short time.
Mm.
And here I am, still here, and always by choice. But my first job was Cuba Smithfield. And Cuba is a little town about 30 miles east of here. And Smithfield was a tiny, tiny little dot on the map that was about 5 miles from Cuba. They've since consolidated. But I actually loved it. I just thought it was magical. The schools were so small, it gave a feeling of intimacy that I absolutely loved. And the staffs were good staffs. The families were good people. The children were amazing children. So there was nothing not to love. So I stayed in small rural schools my entire career. I never did even work in a school as big as Macomb.
Wow. And, it's really a great story to hear about how you talk about that family atmosphere, and you must have seen a variety of family kids in different families, but some of the same families, and getting to know people in that area, and starting to care about people in that area.
I really did. It was just wonderful. I liked it from the very beginning. And actually, Smithfield is a tiny, tiny little school.
Mm-hmm.
We had 5 full-time teachers, first, second, third, fourth, and fifth grade. That was it. 1 first, second, third, fourth, and fifth grade. I was shared with Cuba. So I was in Smithfield school 2 days a week, and maybe alternating Fridays. I can't quite remember. The special ed teacher also was part-time. The librarian came in certain mornings. Special reading, as they called it then, came in for her little schedule. And the kindergarten teacher was there only, I think, half days, a few days a week. So it was a tiny, tiny little staff and a tiny little school in a tiny little town. And I loved it. It was just great.
Now, did you eventually then, because it seems like you must have hit a lot of other small districts as well. How did that work?
Well, I only stayed in Cuba Smithfield 2 years because the drive, it was 30 minutes from here. And in the winter, it was a little dangerous driving back and forth.
Right.
And although we had snow days, which I'd never heard of growing up. The first time I got called on a snow day not to come to work, I was afraid not to go. I never heard of such a thing. And they said, no, it's a lot of snow. You just stay home. So, and I think that year we had 8 snow days in January. So it was nice not to have to go, but still it was hard for me to carpool because I was shared between the 2 schools, 2 different towns, really. So After a couple of years, I just thought it was better for me to come closer to Macomb. So I worked in Colchester School District, 80, fall of 80 and fall of 81. And then in fall of 82, Colchester decided to share me with Northwestern, which was in Good Hope. So then I did those 2 schools for the next, 2 or 3 years. And then I decided to take a job that was in industry school open there. And I asked them if they then would share with Northwestern, because I really did like the job in Good Hope a lot. And they said, yes, we worked that out. So then for 20 years, I was shared between industry school and Northwestern School. And then I think at that time was when Northwestern consolidated
Right.
with Colchester. So then I went back to Colchester, Good Hope, for a few years. And then I ended my career, the last 3 years, my public school career, between Good Hope, which was then called West Prairie, and VIT. When I retired from school, I was still doing early intervention, which I had started in 2000 as a side career. When I started doing early intervention with birth to 3-year-olds in their homes, I thought within a year or two, I would choose public school or early intervention. But I liked them both so much, I kept them both. So I still worked full-time in public school setting, and I had clients after school and during the summer and such through early intervention. So after I retired from public school speech therapy, I continued part-time early intervention for another, I don't know how many years, until 2020.
Just couldn't shake it, huh?
No, I really couldn't. And there were times when I thought, I'm done. And then I would get a call from early intervention that they needed either a therapist or evaluations done or something. And then I realized I wasn't done. Mm-hmm. My heart wasn't done. It took a long, long time to be done. And I often tell this story, but when I finished doing early intervention, it was during COVID, because the whole thing changed during COVID. You couldn't go into the homes. You couldn't see the clients. You really couldn't continue the profession at that time. It wasn't possible. And so after not doing it for quite a few months, I thought it was a natural exit for me. But I had this little girl. She was adorable. 2 years old, little blonde, big blue eyes, absolutely adorable. And I would go in a big bag of tricks for her because she had a short attention span. And so I would bring out the puzzle, and she'd go, oh, we're going to do a puzzle. She didn't speak that clearly, but going to do a puzzle. She was all excited about the puzzle. Yeah, we're going to do a puzzle. So we'd sit down and I would do a couple pieces of the puzzle and she'd say, I done. And I'd say, no, we're not done. We're going to finish the puzzle. Come on over, we're going to finish the puzzle. So she watched me finish the puzzle. I would talk my way through the puzzle while she watched. Then I would pull out my book and she would get all excited about the book. Oh, we're going to read a book. So yeah, we're going to read a book. So I would start the book. We'd get a few pages into it and she'd say, I done. And I'd say, no, we're not done. Come on over and listen to the book. So she wouldn't really get involved, but she would kind of watch from over there. And then the next toy would come out and it'd be the same thing. This little girl was always telling me, I done. And most children, you can redirect them and get them interested in what you're doing again. But with her, I done pretty much meant I done. So I quickly finished up what we were supposed to finish together and went on to the next thing. So when I decided to leave EI, I brought my letter to the office, which is just a couple of blocks from here. And the administrator of the program was out that day and I wanted to tell him in person, but I thought, well, I'll leave a letter and I'll talk to him when he's back in the office. And so when I finished up my letter, I said, in the words of one of my favorite little 2-year-olds, I done. That's it. I was finally done.
That's a perfect story. And it also makes me think, though, Patti, that, I talk to people a lot of times about what the joys and the challenges of their profession would be. And I would think sometimes they intersect in your areas because the challenges can become joys and the joys can become challenges.
Absolutely. And one thing that you just brought up that I hadn't thought of, but I have thought of it often over the years, and I'm glad it's coming up, is when I started, I felt like I was driving the train. And once I started working, after a little while, I realized I'm not going to always be able to drive the train because you have to be ready for what that child is ready for. And if you have a lesson plan all worked out and it doesn't go your way, you've missed an opportunity. So I felt like probably one of the biggest things I learned was always be able to fly by the seat of my pants, be ready. You have a goal in your head of what you want to accomplish. And if you can't accomplish it by going in this way, then go the back door. And I really thought that was valuable because I never wanted to waste my time with my clients. I always wanted to be valuable. So if plan A wasn't working, then I tried plan B just in a snap. And if plan B wasn't working, then you go on to the next thing. And you always should be ready to address your goal in any way you can get there.
Yeah, that sort of adaptability is
Mm-hmm.
something that I'm not sure you can always be prepared with a young person that's just starting the profession. It's just one of those things you have to grow and put into your tool belt along the way.
Exactly. And I did feel my very closest friend is somebody that is also a speech pathologist. She was just a few quarters ahead of me at Western. So we became friends during our graduate programs, but we really became bonded friends right after. And we, to this day, are still the closest of friends. And that relationship has helped so much. And one of the things we've talked about as we've become mature speech therapists, and we would go to conventions and workshops and various continuing education opportunities together and see younger and younger and younger speech pathologists coming out of the colleges, is we always felt that our experience was really valuable.
Well, you just can't put experience in that maturity that you're talking about. You can't put that into a bottle. Sometimes you can't even put into a book. You just have to live it.
Well, and then as we got older, we were both doing EI as well. And I would think usually the parents on the other side of the door, you never know what you're walking into when you're doing early intervention. Yeah. And so you go up to the door and you knock, and you just never know what you're walking into. And at the same time, those parents they don't know what they're walking into either. So we just would always, as we got older, we would say to each other, how do you feel when you think that family who are in their 20s or 30s, usually, not much older than that, expect probably a therapist coming in that's also in their 20s and 30s, and there's you and I walking in. And we would remind each other, we have the experience. It's not the age, it's the experience that you carry.
That's right. Absolutely. So, as another experienced person, I put a stamp on that. One of the things I was going to ask you is, you have this great career. Would you say that there's anything that's really changed, a big change, anything that, is it just more awareness of problems? Have you seen, are there more problems? Are there different problems? Anything that you would notice now that you've gone through a career?
The career, I believe that Western produces excellent speech pathologists, ready for the workforce, ready for whatever path in speech pathology they pick. I chose public schools, but a lot of my friends didn't. There's lots of paths you can choose. And so if you want to change your career mid-career, if you want to tweak it a little bit, there's a lot of other opportunities out there as well. But anyway, I have felt that there was always that opportunity to change, but there was always a necessity to stay current. This profession is not one where you learn what you're going to do and then you start your career and you stagnate. There's no room for stagnation. And I think the reason for that, getting back to your question, is that the role of a speech pathologist really did change. I also think we do see more problems. We see different problems. We identify more problems. But I think it kind of went from, in the early days of speech pathology, particularly in the public schools, you were a speech correctionist. So you were mostly working with articulation problems, and you were mostly just changing artic. And then the profession all of a sudden started to encompass phonology and language delay and language deviation. And then that became a bigger field. And then the next thing you're encompassing something else and something else. As the relationships between learning and communication became more clear, and reading and communication and speech and language and reading and all these things, as they started to change globally, I'll say, the speech pathologist was involved in a larger circle of communication difficulties. So we kind of went from being, I think, a speech correctionist to being a communication specialist.
Mm.
And so there were just more things under the umbrella to work with.
That makes sense. And it gets me back to also thinking about, and I hope that our current students and future prospective students will consider this. From talking with you, talking with many other people in your area, it seems like not only do you have to have this interest in wanting and a desire to want to help other people. It seems to me that most of the people in your area have this, and you talked about this early on, I want to help people. And it seemed like you couldn't shake that for years and years and years. You just had that love of helping other people. And it makes me think of, you must have, whether you're realizing it or not, you've been receiving something in return. Maybe it's from the kids or the parents. You must have been getting something that you said, that's
well,
okay,
before
keep
you
me going.
even said that, I was going to reply to what you said by saying, I got probably more from them than they did from me.
Really?
Yeah, it was just a lot of fulfillment. It was. And I wanted to ask you too, since you have talked to a lot of people, and you still do, that are training speech pathologists, audiologists, do they seem to have the same feeling about the profession that I do?
Well, the people that are younger, have they're trying to find where their area is. They're trying to, as you said, it has ballooned into so many different areas. I think that it's a little bit. That's where I'm interested in finding out how the profession has evolved and how we try to help people.
Well, and I often hear comments from various people that maybe don't feel that the master's degree is necessary. But I always believed it was necessary, because there's only so much that you can learn when you're balancing a bachelor's degree and you're learning as much as you can in your department, and you're taking basic curriculum and a lot of other things that you take. And so I think the master's degree, no matter how long it is now, if it's 1.5 years, 2 years, 2 years plus, that's where you really get your streamlined focus.
Yeah. Well, and, the department does a great job, even as you had mentioned back in the 70s, of making sure the faculty are supervising and helping the students understand what's going on and what kind of problems they may encounter along the way.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, because it's a teaching process. Being in the clinic is a teaching process. But the older speech pathologists, such as myself, or even a little younger, do they always seem to have the same enthusiasm and ideas about the profession that they had?
Well, I get the fortune of talking to people like you that were the best and the brightest. And so they have that love and that desire. And that's always encouraging to me, is to see that enthusiasm for that. Because I would think that if you didn't have the desire to want to do that, you would burn out. I would think that.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because several people that were really bright, talented speech pathologists didn't stay in the field. They did burn out.
Because you're asking for an unusual combination of personal characteristics. You're asking for people to be very, it's a very difficult scientific field that you go into. You talk about continuing education. for somebody to think, you mean I have to stay up to date for the rest of my life?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you do.
Yeah.
And you have to have this human side that really wants to help people of all different areas that you may not have ever encountered in your life before. I mean, that's a unique individual.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. I think that's a compliment.
It is. It's a great, well, for somebody that has has such a great distinguished career as you have. And that's, one of the things why I wanted to talk with you, because I had the special opportunity to meet you and all the other, your other pals that came that day. And I hope that, I hope that we can celebrate them and they know that, that's part of the legacy that we have within the WIU and the department. And I want to continue to let people know about it, especially the young people. So our last question, Patti, is always about what kind of recommendations do you have for a young person that's considering speech pathology and audiology?
Well, first and foremost, I would definitely want to get into Western if I could.
There you go.
That would be great, because that is a stellar department. And I just think you have to be ready to hit the boards running, because it's a fabulous profession. There's a lot of room for change if you feel like you're stagnant or you want to try something new. It's exciting, it's challenging, and it offers a lot of opportunities, and it's really a fabulous career. So I think some people try it and it's not for them. But if you think you want to be a speech pathologist or probably an audiologist, which they are overlapping, I just think that you should be serious about your classwork, absorb as much knowledge as you possibly can while you're in school, so you get the opportunity to really understand what you're looking toward, and then just jump in and enjoy every minute.
Some great words there. And Patti, I thank you for sharing your story, for not only with myself, but with the rest of the audience.
Well, and actually, this is something that I'm really not that comfortable with. But when you contacted me and said, can you do it for the department? I said yes.
Yeah. And that's what I know. I impose on people with this, because rarely do people want to talk about themselves. That, people that are helpers are always, they're wanting to stay in the shadows. And so I appreciate that you're willing to do this, but it's been a great time talking with you.
Well, you as well. And I'm glad I said yes. And really that is for Western, because Western's program has really made my life great.
And thanks to all those that are watching or listening to this episode. We will continue to have alumni from all of our college departments on the podcast. And we hope that you continue to support not only our departments and schools here at Western Illinois, but you continue to help support the university. So until the next episode, stay safe, take care, and God bless.